Okay, hi everyone. This is going to be materials prep for the pamphlet books, the 4 pamphlet books that we're going to make for this project. I'm going to show you how to prep material or prep your text pages. I'm going to show you how to prep your covers, and then for each book I'll show you how to sew it separately. There'll be separate videos, but for the materials prep it's all going to be the same. And we're going to start with the text paper. So what I'm holding here in my hand is the handout that I saved for you guys as a PDF. And it just gives you a list to go from as far as what the materials are you're going to need for the project. I don't go into the tools because you're always going to need the same little set of tools. You will need an awl, and you'll need needle and thread. But you'll see that when we get to the sewing of the book. So we need to use one of two things. You're either going to use Mohawk paper, which is a higher quality text paper. It's better for drawing and for writing on than just plain copy paper. But if that's all you have, you can use plain copy paper. So ultimately, we're going to need 16 sheets that are 5.5 inches tall, which is half of a sheet of 8.5 by 11 by 8.5 inches wide. So this is just going to be a stack of 8 sheets cut in half, if that's what you're going to use. And I'm going to show you how to do that. And then if you're going to use the Mohawk paper, which is much nicer as far as just the quality for writing and even just handling, it's better. I'm going to show you how to prep from that as well. So and you're also going to need one sheet of 8.5 by 11. That's a full sheet that you're not going to cut down. And that's going to be when we make the French fold book. We will need this full sheet. So I've got this hot pink one because I wanted to differentiate from the other stack of paper that I'm going to use. This one's going to stay complete. We're not going to cut this one at all. So that one I'm going to set to the side. And then the handout I just have here kind of just to refer to it myself. And I think what I'll do first, this is going to be for when I'm punching, and that's later. I just wanted to show you that you might need a catalog when we're going to punch, because you're not going to have like a wooden punching trough is what I would usually use in our class. But I just want to show you a way to do it in your house. You can, if you have a catalog or something, you can open it up to the center and use that to punch with, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But just to, you know, kind of pull your materials together, you might think about this. There's other ways of doing it, which I'll demo as well. But I'm going to move this out of my way for right now. And the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to cut these sheets in half. And what I would recommend doing, actually, I'm going to bring that back because I'm going to use this as an edge to push against. Actually, this doesn't sit flat on the table. I need an edge. Like if I had a board, that would be better to be able to square up to. So actually, never mind, skip that step. We will do them one at a time. Headphone keeps going out. Fix this. We're going to do them one at a time because I think we can just get the best result from that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my cutting mat. And then I need my ruler and my X-Acto knife, and I'm going to square this up on my cutting mat. And then I will just use the mark at 5.5. So 5.5 to cut it in half, because I really do want to keep that height 5.5. I don't want it to be any shorter because it will just get all off course if everybody's cutting different things. So I really want to keep it at 5.5. So I'm going to take my time. I might pause the video. I'll do a few of these and then I'll do the other ones off camera because I'm not going to do all 8 sheets. So then I'm just going to cut it in half like this. So that's 2 of them. And I'll bring the next sheet over and do the same thing. And you can, it doesn't matter where you put it if you have a big enough mat. And let me show you a way to do this if you don't have this size mat, which a lot of you might not. But I'm going to do one more like this. I'm just trying to get it as square as possible. This is the 5.5 height. And I don't have to cut the width. Okay, so there's 2, and I've got to do 6 more. and I will have a stack. And then the way they're going to go together, I'll just go ahead and show you this one, is you're just going to take the stack of four sheets, and these are already cut to size, so that's a little bit of a problem, and I'll show you why in a second. And then I'm going to fold this in half as a whole stack of four. And when you're doing this, so what's going to happen is, because there's a thickness of paper, you're kind of going to get a little stair stepping of the stack, because there's a thickness that it's going around, so that top sheet gets pulled back further than the other ones. I mean, this is a thin enough paper where it's not really that big a deal. So I'm just trying to square that up as best as possible, but you're going to see a little bit of a point at the foredge here when you do this. So I'm just going to push it, for right now, I'm just going to push it finger tight, but this is where you could use your bone folder to tighten it down. And I will do that when we get to where we're sewing. So that's going to be a section, and you're going to have 4 of these. And that's what I'm going to show you to prep. So I showed you how to do it with the text paper, and you would do that with all of them. And then the other way to do it is to use the Mohawk paper. So I'm going to pause and come back with the Mohawk paper to show that. So okay, so this is hard to demonstrate. Now you're seeing just a big off-white screen. This is the piece of paper that's on my cutting mat. Move it a little bit. So this is a large sheet of paper. So what we're going to do, I'm going to try to demo this as best as possible. You might have to kind of look back and forth between the like the forward shot and then the down shot as I do this. But what we're going to do is fold this sheet in half, and we're going to tear this down into 8ths. Okay, so the way we start that is to just fold it in half with the short edges together. This is just a giant version of the first time that we were folding paper. We're going to bring the short edges together and then just fold it here in the center. And I'm kind of hanging off the table a little bit, so this is not easy to do when you've got you know, like one end of a table is your space. And then I'm going to tear this. So I just folded the piece of paper in half. So now it's this size instead of that full sheet. And I'm going to tear this in half. So the way I'm going to do this, let me see if I can get into frame a little bit. I have a fettling knife here. A butter knife would work, or a letter opener of any kind. Or you can also use a ruler, and I'll do that with the next tear. I'm going to do the first one with the fettling knife. So I'm going to start at one end, and you kind of can't see what I'm doing. I can try to kind of move it up a little bit. So I'm at one, my knife is inside the fold. Okay, so it's inside, and I've got the kind of beveled edge against the fold. And then what I want to do is keep the knife really flat and then pull up and out at the same time. So just keep it really flat. It's almost like my fingers are on top of the handle, not wrapped around it, because I want to keep the knife as flat as possible. And then I'm just kind of slowly tearing. Like that. Actually, I'll just go ahead and do this full sheet with the fettling knife, and I'll do the second sheet with the ruler. Okay, so now what I did is, okay, so that's my sheet that I cut. I tore down half of it. Now I'm going to take those two, now it's 2 sheets, 2 smaller sheets. So I'll take those and then fold those in half, short edges together. And you know, I'm being careful, but I'm not going crazy about getting them lined up, because we're going to trim these down. We're going to trim our sections down, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So now I just folded those 2 sheets in half, and now I'm going to tear those. So again, I open up here and I stick the knife in between, and then I just keep it really flat. And I'm kind of putting my finger on here and keeping my fingers around, but I don't want them underneath the knife. I think that's a mistake that people make. And if you tear like this, it's going to get really messy. So you want to keep the knife flat on the surface. And I'm not trying to do it in one long tear either. I'm doing it in little sections. And then now I've got 4 sheets. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not going to try to do 4 at a time. I'm going to take the top 2. And then I'm going to fold them in half. And again, I'm, you know, folding in half, but I'm not perfectly folded. There, you know, there's a little bit of a crooked edge there, but no big deal. And then I'm going to put the knife in here and again, tear. And now I've got 4 sheets. That's one section. So a 4 sheets or 4 folios is what I want to fold together. So I can go ahead, jog this up and fold this in half. So that's one of my sections. It's just not trimmed to size, which is what we're going to do next. So now this is my other little half a sheet, quarter of a sheet. So now I'm going to fold that in half, tear it. And then that's my other 4 sheets. Keep them all stacked up and fold them together. Like that. And then I will show you how to do it with a ruler. If you don't have a fettling knife or a thin knife like this, I can show you how to do it with a ruler. So I'm going to pause and then come back with the next sheet. Okay, here's the second full Mohawk sheet. So again, we're going to do it the same way, but we're just going to use a different tool. We're going to use a ruler. So I'm going to take the full sheet, fold it in half with the short edges together. Like this. And then I'm going to use a ruler instead of the fettling knife. So I'm just going to use a ruler like this. This is just my 18-inch cork back ruler. I'm going to put it so that the metal is against the surface and the cork is up instead of, I'm afraid that it'll cause friction. So I'm going to do it with the cork facing up. And then I'm going to do it the exact same way. I'm just holding onto the ruler, get my hand more in the frame. So like this. And this, I have to put my fingers somewhere. It's like I can't hold it from here because there's no thickness. So I have to put my fingers under, but I'm trying to keep this as flat as I can as I tear. So what's going to happen is this is going to sort of tear out a little bit of a thickness because it's just not as flat. And you can see I'm using my other hand to kind of just keep it flat, keep the piece of paper flat. And there you go. So that tore, you can see a little bit of a messier edge. It's nothing terrible at all. It's fine. And if you keep that flat, that's going to give you the cleanest edge. But as you're doing this, if you're doing this, the first time you do it, it's awkward and it's probably not going to look like this. But don't forget that we're going to be cutting these down. Let me just show you. So we're going to be starting, before I tear the rest, let me just pause because I know people are going to freak out about this, because if it's messy around the edges, you think it's ruined. If it doesn't look like this, it's like, oh no. But we're going to be cutting it down to this size. So look how much excess we have. Okay, so this is the finished book size. This is how much excess. So if there's like raggedy edges, as long as it's not like a huge rip, you've got plenty of space for any mistakes or raggediness that are around the edges. So don't worry about it, okay? If it doesn't look exactly like that, it's still good. Okay. All right, so now I'm gonna tear. So I had my single that I tore in half. Now I'm gonna fold this in half and tear this one. I'm just gonna show this again. It's almost like, how to describe it? It's almost like I'm pulling down and out. It's like I'm sawing it a little bit. Flat, flat, flat is the secret. And then the last, I'm gonna do just 2 at a time because it's too hard to tear through 4. And that will make a mess, so don't do that. I'll do these 2. So you can see that kind of got a little messy. It's okay. And then my last one. Just fold it and then tear. Okay. So then you should have a set of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's your section, and you're going to fold that together. Section of 4, fold it together. And so you should have, from 2 sheets of Mohawk, you're going to have 4 sections of 4 folios. And if you do the text, the copy paper version, they're already going to be to size. You're not going to need to do this next step that I'm going to show you how to cut these down. So I'm going to show you how to prep the covers. And then I will show you how to come back and prep these. Okay, so I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so now we're going to cut the cover strips from the Canson paper. So I've got some that I was using for another project, and you can use 1 sheet, and because I have 2 shorter sheets, I'm going to use 2 different ones, but you can use 1 color because you can get 4 strips out of a full sheet. So if this sheet wasn't cut, it would be like the 19.5 wide by 24, whatever it is. I think it's that 23.5 or something like that. But we're going to cut off the 19-inch strip at 5.5 inches tall. So that's going to be how it runs. Now this piece of paper, and I'm going to do a video about grain direction, but on these Canson or Fabriano color sheets, the grain runs down the long end, and we want the grain of our book. So if this is our folios, our sections, the grain is running like this. It follows the spine. So you can imagine we want this full sheet is has the grain running like this. Then I want this grain to match the grain on the paper. So that's why we're going to cut our strips here like that. And we're going to cut 5.5 here. We're just going to cut the whole width of the sheet. And then we're going to cut another 5.5 whole width of the sheet. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that. Now this is a little hard to do because usually we would use a paper cutter, but we don't have that. So using the mat is a little bit difficult too, because you probably don't have a ruler long enough. This is an 18-inch. So you're going to have to do it in stages. And I'm going to show you how to do it just using pencil marks, because I really can't get into frame all that well. You can do it this way, but because I can't make my ruler match from side to side, I think that's difficult. So I'm going to do it with pencil marks, which I use all the time. And so what we're going to do is at that short end of the sheet, we're going to measure up. So these are my pre-prepped sections. This is just the copy paper version because I haven't shown you how to do the Mohawk version, but I'm going to do that in just a few minutes. But these are the ones that we cut. And then they're going to be the same height. So they're going to be 5.5 inches. So what I usually do is I will do my pencil, and I've got my X-Acto ready and my ruler, and I'm going to measure up, and I'm going to just go a little bit higher than 5.5. Okay, so when I measure on my ruler, I'm going to use the 5.5, and I hope you guys can see that. I'm just putting the 5.5 at the tip or at the edge of the paper. And then up here, I'm actually going to go on top of my ruler, just above. So that makes it just a smidge taller than 5.5. And that's what I want. So then I'm going to go down a little bit further so I can have something to connect. Sometimes I have to stand up to see. Five and a half, and then I'm just going to put my pencil above to make my mark. And then what I'm going to do is, I kind of can't get this full sheet into frame, but I can't get my full ruler on there anyway, so I'm going to have to do it in stages. So I'm just going to put, like I have done before, I'm going to put my knife into one of the marks, push my ruler up against that one, and then find the other one and line up the edge. And then I'm kind of looking at the pencil marks to make sure they're in the same position against the ruler. And then I'm going to cut probably on this ruler to about 15. So you can, well, maybe you can't see, but it's overhanging the paper just a tiny bit. And then I'm going to start up there, and then I'm going to come down. And then I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to have to pick it up and move it. That's okay. And then I'm going to line it up again, just where I had cut, and make sure I'm on the mat completely. And then I'm going to kind of run my knife up where I've already cut so that I can follow the same line. And then when I get to where I can cut again, I'll just use a little more pressure. So there's one strip cut. And the height should be just a hair taller than the book. And it is. It's just a little bit taller. And that's what I want. So I'm going to do it again. And I need to cut 4 of these because we're going to make 4 pamphlets. So put my knife down, measure the 5.5, and then go on top of it. Five and a half, and on top. And then put my knife in one of the marks, push against it, and then I'm going to overhang one end. So you can see what I'm talking about. Like here is what I'm talking about, letting my ruler overhang the paper just a tiny bit. But I need to stay on the mat too, so I'm like trying to balance what I'm doing here. So put my knife in, push against the blade, and then find the other mark. Good. Keep pushing past it. There we go. Okay. And then I can cut a little ways down, not all the way to the end. And then I'll stop and readjust. I don't know if you guys will need to do this. Maybe you can do it in one movement. And if you can, that's great. Go for it. And then I'm just checking. So I lined it back up, but I'm checking again to make sure it's smooth. And then I'll just go ahead and finish the cut. Yeah, and I can see my pencil mark a little bit there, so I'm gonna just erase that. And I could also just make sure that's on the inside of the book or whatever. Okay, so there's my second strip. And I could actually get one more out of that, but I'm gonna change to because I'm gonna have a set of 4 books. So I'm gonna have 2 of one color and 2 of another. So I'll show you on this piece as well. I'll make sure I'm cutting from the right edge. So I'm checking to make sure these match. Checking that width. So this is the direction. And I can also feel the grain. So I could check for the grain. And like I said, I'm going to make a whole video about this. But the grain direction where it's easy to bounce it, that's the grain direction. Where when I push this way, it's very resistant to bending. That means the grain is not running this way. It's running this way. Right there. So that's how I want my strip to be. Just like this one here. Okay. All right, so there's a mark right there that I don't want, so I'm going to turn over. This is people, you know, students have left this in my after class when they're done or whatever, and they don't want that paper. They'll leave it, and that's what this is. So 5.5, and then I'm going to go above it. This is one of those times where I wish I had my ceramic pencil because it's white. It's like a chalk. And that's really handy on a dark sheet. This is kind of a medium. So you can sort of see it right there. The pencil mark. So again, I'm just going to do my little trick where I stick the blade in, line it up, and find the other mark. And then do the first cut. And finish it. Okay. All right, I'm not gonna, I'll do the other one off camera because you've watched me do that 3 times, but I'm gonna have 4 strips, and then I'm gonna show you how to prep the Mohawk sections, how to prep those and cut those down. So I'll show you that next. All right, so now we're gonna prep the sections that we made from that Mohawk. There's a few ways to do this. I'm trying to think of the most efficient way, and I think this is what I'm going to show you guys to do. You could do what we just did, which was to make pencil marks and measure out and make pencil marks at all the measurements. I think it's hard to keep it square that way. So what I have laying here is a piece of wood that I use as a press board. So this is like a nice finished piece of wood. If you have something like this, a bookshelf that you can take off the shelf part, you know, sometimes they'll have those little loose shelves, that would work. Something that's just really, really square and that you could put a weight on to hold it in place as we do this, I think that would be really helpful to have. So I have this little book weight that I will put on mine. It's just a piece of iron and it'll hold it in place. And the other thing we need is we're going to make a little jig that we will probably, I know we'll use it at other times. And so I feel like this is probably the most efficient thing to do. And that's why I'm going to do it this way. So we're going to make a 5.5 inches tall by 4 1/4 inch wide piece of cardboard. You could use a cereal box, although that's a little bit easy to cut. This is just some of that binder's board that I had you guys make. Something happened weird, but I think we're okay. Yeah, something happened. I think I shook my camera and it just disturbed it. I'm going to move this board out of the way for just a second. That's what we're going to use when we press the sections up against to cut. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. But right now, what we're going to do is we're going to do what I was talking about doing with these, which is to just measure in, make tick marks, and cut out. So this piece happens to be very square. And so I'm going to actually just start from a corner and go out. But if you have something that's not square, the first thing you want to do is square that up. And so if you don't have something that's square, this is a good tool for that, is to just square up a 90-degree angle. And you'll just use your triangle and trim that down so that the edges are square. And you may have to, you know, do it so that the long edge or whatever, you know, you may have to work on how to figure out how to make that square, but you want a square corner to measure from, and you really want a full square edge. If you bought the board that I asked you guys to buy, that's square. So you should be able to use just a little corner of this, start from one of those corners. I'm going to use a little bit smaller ruler. This ruler is really long. I'm going to get my 12-inch ruler. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to make this 4 1/4 wide and 5.5 inches tall, which is what this is. Okay, so that's those sections that we prepped using the copy paper because it's already to size. But this is for the Mohawk paper. And there's going to be other times that we use this. So when you make this little jig, hold on to it, mark it, say, you know, mark the size on there, and I'll show you what I'm talking about with a Sharpie so that you don't accidentally use it for something else. So I'm going to just measure from the edge 4 1/4, 4 1/4, and in a couple of spots, I'm going to do that. Oh, whoops. Make sure I did it not from the edge of the ruler because this ruler doesn't start at the end. It starts in a little bit. So 4 1/4, okay. And then 4 1/4. So a couple of tick marks is enough. And then in the other direction, it's going to be 5.5. And I'm not worried about the grain. I actually don't care right now because that's not the purpose of this. It's a jig, and so in fact, I kind of don't want it to follow the grain. I definitely don't care because it's not what it's for. So 5.5. And make a couple of marks so I can connect them. And then I'm going to cut this. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all the way across this piece. at the 5.5 inch measure. Oops, I already lost the marks. There they are, 5.5. So I have to cut a few times. I need a sharp blade, and this board's a little thick, so I have to cut a few times across. And then I come and find those 4.25 marks. And then I cut down. Okay, so there's my scraps. I don't need those. And now I have this 5.5 by 4.25. Looks pretty good. So that's what we're gonna do. So we made our jig, and now I'm gonna just mark on there 5.5 high by 4.25 wide. Maybe write it on both sides so that you don't accidentally throw it away, or you try to use it for something else and you can't later when we're making our boards. This is too small, so you can't use that anyway. So that doesn't make sense right now, but it will. Okay, so that's our little jig. I think that's a good thing to do. You could also use a product box of any kind that's really flat. You want it flat, not a wrinkly, crumpledy one. The back of a sketchbook if you don't have this board, but you're going to need board, so you need to get that at some point if you don't have it already. You don't have to have it for the project, but this is a good thing to have on hand. I hope you have that. You will need it soon. You might need it for the next I think you need it for the next project. So now prepping these sections. So we've already folded them up. They just have to be trimmed down to size now. So this is where I'm going to use this board and a weight. So now I can push that folded edge against something to hold it into place. I can also use this and push against that edge. And so now you can see where we're going with this. I'm just going to cut right up against that board like this. Okay, so everything jogged up tight, and now, now this is not easy to do because we are cutting through a thickness of paper. So we got to be very tight, hold it in place, and cut. Now you may need to, after you get this lined up, you may need to nudge this out of your way to get that cut, that first cut in the back. And that's fine if you need to move it, but just don't let go of this. Hold it down firm. And then you might have to stand up. Probably the better thing to do is stand up, get on top of that, and just cut. So you make sure you're using a sharp blade. Make sure you just keep cutting in the same spot. And then I'm going to cut the vertical. And I'm doing this a little bit by feel. Like once I feel like I can feel the mat, I stop. And then this last cut up across the bottom. And there's one more cut, so I didn't let go of it. That's good because I had one more little cut to make somewhere. I think it's this corner. It isn't cut all the way. There. So now there's my section done. Okay, so this is somewhat, labor intensive. It's not that bad. So you don't have to have a cutter. You can see how much excess I have left because we're doing this specific size. So I'm not going to hold on to that. You might need this. I'm trying to think if we need this for anything. I don't think so. And we're going to make a punching jig too, but I'll hold on about that. So that's one. I'll do it one more time. So there's 4 of these total. And we'll do it again. So jogging back so that the folded edge is flush. I'm going to push against the board that has my little weight on it. And then I can just put this wherever. It doesn't have to, I could even, put it way up here if I want. And I'd have a little piece of scrap. I don't know. I don't care about that. But if you're worried about that, you could do it that way. So once I get it in place, got a good hold of it, I can cut. That's it, okay? So there you go, second section. So we're gonna do this again. We're gonna have to do it multiple times in this class. And actually that's really clean. Sometimes it's better than using a cut trimmer because the cut trimmer, if you don't hold it down tight enough, there's different things that can go wrong, but yeah, that's pretty good. It's nice. So the difference between this, so you see how clean that cut is and how flat that is because we cut it after it was folded. This one, it's a little bit thinner too. You can't, you know, because the paper is just not as good quality. This is like a 80-pound text, and this is probably, I forget the weight of this, but it's, you know, copy paper or printer paper. And then you have that little pointed edge here. You can see right there where that little stack of paper is pointed. Now, for our purposes, it's really fine. We're not going to worry about something like that. It's not going to be something very apparent, but that is why we prefer to fold and then cut instead of just cut and then fold, which is what this is. Okay, so by the end of this, you're going to cut 2 more of these 2 sections that you prepped, and you'll have a stack of 4 that look like this. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video and come back and talk about the rest of the details that you need for the prepping part. Okay, all right. So one more thing that you need is a punching jig. So you're going to need to use that little, you need the punching jig to be the same height as your sections. So the same height as these. So I'm just going to use the punching jig to cut a little piece of paper out of one of my scrap pieces. So I'm just going to line up. Again, I'm using my board, and I'm going to put this on. It wants to slide. That's the only thing with it, is it wants to slide. So actually, I'm not going to use the board because it's being picky. So I'm going to do it just using the corner of the piece of paper. And I'm just going to cut a little rectangle out that's that height. So I just lined it up here, here, and I'm just going to cut this piece of paper. And we need 3 punching jigs, 3 different ones. Now, you can also use your offcuts from when we're making the book, but you need it now so you can kind of know what you have and know what you need. So for this, they just need to be about 1 inch wide, and that's not really that important, but you do want them to be straight. So I'm just going to use my mat and just line it up, line this piece of paper up, and then cut strips that are 1 inch wide. So I have a 4 1/4 strip or piece that I just cut out, and so I know I have plenty with 3 1 inch pieces. And this one, I'm not even going to worry about. So this will just be my other jig. So I just need 3 of these, and I just need them to know that they're the same height as my text block or my text section. So they seem to be 5 1/2 inches tall. So those are prepped now as well. So let's kind of go over what we need here. So you need this jig for cutting down your sections, and you're going to hold on to that for the rest of the semester because we're going to use that more than one time. You need 4 text blocks or sections, 4 sets of 4. So in each section, there's 4 folios, 4 pieces of paper. So a folio is a single folded piece of paper, and you need 4 folios to make 1 section. So you need 4 sections of 4 folios each, okay? So that's that, and then you need another 8 1/2 by 11 sheet. That's just a single sheet that we're gonna do a French fold with, but you need that unfolded, just ready to go. So these are the pieces. So those sections, your little jig, your punching jigs that we'll do with each book, the 8 1/2 by 11. So you just need 1 set. You don't need 2 sets of sections. You don't need a copy paper version and a Mohawk version. You need one or the other. So I prepped both, but I'm going to use the Mohawk because I prefer that paper. And then you need your strips for the covers. So you should have 4 of those. So I have two green and 2 pink. Interleave them so you can see. So I have 4 covers that are going to get folded for each book, 3 punching jigs, 4 sections, 1 8.5 by 11, 1 jig for cutting down the sections, and I think that's it. And then you need your thread. Your thread's going to look probably something like this. It's going to be white like this. I'm going to try to sew with a dark thread so that you can see that happening. If we're sewing on the paper, I don't know, I feel like it might show up better. So I have a color thread like this, and that's fine to use, but you do need a binding thread. And so the link that I sent you guys to order is a binding thread. This is made of high quality linen, and it's kind of a heavier and stiffer thread than just sewing thread or embroidery thread. So you definitely need this. And then you're going to need your needle. So here's my little set of needles. Tapestry needle. They're dull tip. This is what I like to use. But if yours doesn't look exactly like that, it just needs to be approximately that. And that should make you ready to go to sew the different pamphlet books that we're going to sew. And let me tell you again what they are. They are the French fold with a wrapper cover, which is illustrated here down at the bottom of this handout. The 5-hole standard pamphlet, the double pamphlet, and the chain stitch pamphlet, which is really just a decorative stitch pamphlet. And it's always a nice one to make. So we're going to make those four pamphlets. There'll be a video for each one. All right. Thanks. Bye.